Thank you for joining us. This is Health Your Own Way podcast, and I am your host, Akins. Welcome to another episode. Today, we're going to be talking about breaking the stigma of miscarriage. My guest speaker is Kaye Parker. She's an international recognized influencer and a mental health advocate committed to breaking the silence and stigma surrounding miscarriage. I'm really excited to have this conversation because as my ignorant self, I'm going to be ignorant, I wasn't aware that people had stigma around miscarriage. So, Kaye, anything else you want to add before we start this conversation today?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm equally very excited. I'm just blessed to be here to be able to talk about it and end the stigma and even showcase and highlight, like you said, that people just are unaware that there is even such a thing as a stigma with it.
Okay, so again, just excuse my my ignorance to this whole conversation. Really do. I guess the first thing is, where is it a perception that is stigma, or where is stigma? How does stigma derive from somebody having miscarriage? Because that's a sad moment in people's life. So, what? I guess tell me what you mean by stigma in respect to this.
So I'm gonna break it up in a couple of parts.
Sure.
One being that some women, I guess, just like in general, everybody handles grief, trauma, death differently.
Yeah.
So what might be somebody who feels that it's a stigma, yes, it can be a perception based, because somebody else might be like, oh, I had a miscarriage, and then they are able to move on without even kind of a thought. But then there's other people that it is more impactful. So it just depends who you are as a person at whole. I'm going to start off there.
Okay.
Women, typically there's a 1 in 4 miscarriage that women face. And that's 25%. That's a huge, huge number. And I really believe that the stigma comes down to, back in the day, as I like to call it, a lot of women were told to put their heads down. Just, they weren't able to really communicate how they were feeling, what they were thinking. Like, we never were able to vote. We had to stay at home and make babies and clean and cook. And like, we had roles and we had to fit and identify ourselves in these roles. And if something tragic happened, there wasn't really a place where you could talk about it openly and freely, where women don't feel like they're being judged or attacked. When you go through a miscarriage, a lot of big emotions are guilt, and you feel shame. You feel shame that you couldn't be a mom. You feel like you did something wrong. You feel like it's your fault, and you have all these questions. And there's still to this day there's not enough information to help a woman understand why miscarriages happen, other than it's nature's way, or you just have to be okay with not knowing. And so a lot of the times women are just left with their thoughts, and that's a really scary place, especially when you're trying to understand the reasoning behind situations.
So what I'm getting from you, like, so for me, when I was thinking about stigma, I was thinking of and outward external factors, like people looking down on you. But then you're right, then the stigma itself is internalizing, like, putting yourself shame, thinking that you're not a woman if you can't conceive, or why can't I conceive? Like, when you started talking, I was like, okay, I can see why a lot of women would have shame within themselves and create stigma unto themselves in respects to the fact that, okay, you know what, I couldn't do this, something's wrong with me. Then I guess for me, a question, like, on a not a personal level, on your own experience and your knowledge, are there external stigmas out there that are being pushed on women when they do have miscarriages?
I think that a lot of people don't realize the impact that it has on a woman.
Okay.
So women, we have this dream, right? We're told that we're pregnant, we're going to have this beautiful baby. And already we're visualizing what that baby's going to look like, what names we're going to have, like feeling, just imagining how big they're going to be, and their toes and their hands. And you're building this life with an idea that a new baby's going to come. And then you feel your body changing, you see your body changing. Depending on when the miscarriage happens, like, I felt my son, he was moving, he was kicking. So he's a part of you, you're growing. And then when that gets taken away from you, a lot of the times the other spouse, they don't have that connection that you've already built with that baby. So you going to that, your spouse, and you're like, I know for me, like, I went to my spouse and he didn't have any slightly the same, I guess, relationship with the loss that I had. So I didn't feel seen. I didn't feel heard. I didn't feel good enough. I didn't feel like a woman. I didn't feel like a mom. And I had all these internal negative thoughts that were flooding my mind. And he was kind of like, it is what it is. Like he was very just like non-emotional, wasn't really able to talk about it. And then a lot of women are embarrassed by it. Again, shame is a huge thing. And when you have shame, you isolate yourself. So when you see other women, you don't know that how many miscarriages they have, because I don't think people want to talk about the bad stuff. People don't want to be as vulnerable to other people or to strangers. They don't want, like, the miscarriage is personal, even if it's family, or some people like me talk about it, but others don't want to have anybody know. And I think the stigma is shame. I think
Okay.
it's how people might view the woman and how we might think they're viewing. It's all a lot of perception based as well. But I really do think it comes down to shame, and that you're not going to be understood. You're not going to be seen. You're not going to be heard. And then you're just going to feel more isolated.
Then how does someone step out of that? Like, I personally can't. I can't relate. I'm not the right person. I'm gonna be honest. Personally, I don't want kids. I'm gonna be real. I'm like, I don't want kids. I really don't.
Blame
But
you. No.
but I think it's because it's mental health, and like you feel for anybody that goes through any kind of suffering or any grief like that. So for them personally, like how would you tell somebody? Because I have siblings, and God forbid anything like that happens, or even friends, God forbid anything. Like how would you help them, or how can you support them in that situation that helps them come out of that stigma?
Yeah. And I think for me is knowing with mental health is you have to allow people to go through it. When they're
Okay.
in it, allow them to be in it. It took me, to be honest, like years. And it was because there was a lot of like really mildly, there's a lot of trauma that kind of impacted the whole thing. There was a lot going on with mine. Um, but the first thing to do is you have to understand, you have to allow the woman for her body to heal. And without your body healing, you can't expect the brain and your emotions and everything to connect unless your body is healed. So physically, like, I bled for 6 months after my miscarriage. Then I had to have an emergency surgery. So even after giving birth to my son, I still was really, really sick. So when your body's fighting and you have all these hormones, like, your body thinks on a scientific level that you're pregnant, and then you give birth to a baby that's not alive. Your body has to then be like, oh, okay, let's clean it out. Let's figure out what's going on. And then once you heal from that, then you're left with your emotions. So I'm always like, be the master of your emotions and not your slave. Self validate yourself, allow yourself, and forgive yourself. Because I feel like as women, we try to be so many things, and we label ourselves as so many things. We want to do it all because we can do it all. And but I still think there's too much pressure that we put on ourselves, and we don't allow ourselves just to be like, hey, it's okay that he didn't make it. And it doesn't mean that I'm not good enough and that I'm an incapable woman or whatever hurtful things I said to myself. I have to allow myself and be like, there's far greater things than I understand. So what if my body saw something and was like, hey, you know what? This baby isn't really developing right. And that was the reason. Who knows? But the thing is, you have to be okay with not knowing, and you have to give yourself forgiveness and love and light, and all the things that you would want somebody else to give you during your saddest time is what you would need to provide to yourself. And just moving on, allowing yourself to lead mindfully with grace, and just know that the world's a beautiful place. And as long as you're in your emotions and just don't mask them and hide them, and know that there's people here to support you and love you. And it's okay to talk about things, and it's okay to ask for help. And I think that's also part of why I'm so passionate about breaking the stigma, is because I don't want women to feel like they're alone. Because all we do is isolate ourselves, and that's like my biggest thing.
While I was listening to you, like I can tell how genuine you sound. Like I even smile. I'm like you can see the emotions through your like your face, and you can feel it. So I'm, I on a personal level, I'm sorry for your own situation. Like I can tell, I'm a personal level. For anybody who's going through this, I'm like I can't relate, but I can empathize. Like I can feel for you. And I think if anybody was interested in this, maybe learning how to support somebody else, or even discovering how to move forward, or even starting, what's the best platform to reach out to you, just to follow your journey or follow your insight that can help them out going
Yeah.
forward?
So, Trials and Tribulations is what I do every Wednesday on Instagram Live. It's a podcast that I've had. Today is going to be the 72nd episode live, so it's super exciting. But Trials and Tribulations is where people can just come on at Kaye Parker Official, come hang out, listen to what we're talking about that week. It's literally just a place where people can come and feel seen, feel heard, understood. It's a judgment free zone. I have so many guests that just come on from all sides of the world that have all been through their own trials and tribulations, who are to here to share their own story, so that people like you or whoever's watching knows that, hey, there is somebody that I can relate to. Instagram, Kaye Parker Official, TikTok at Kaye Parker Official, and feel free to check out 5 Ways to Heal After a Dramatic Loss or Life Change, which is on, if you Google Kaye Parker, you'll see it come up. It's an amazing read, and it's kind of the real depth of what happened and how I recovered. And honestly, like, I think I always try to send the link out to people who go through it, just so they know that they're not alone, and it gives them kind of some encouragement of the other side.
Appreciate you seeing that. If they just go directly to your website, they can get links to your Instagram, all the stuff that we discussed,
Yeah,
right?
and I'll send you the link of
Oh, I have it. I'm gonna put it in
oh,
the show notes. Got you.
perfect.
I got you. I just wanted to make sure I can put it
I
on
got you.
your website, and then just no, because like I really was excited to hear the fact that you do it live, and I know a lot of people are hurting. Like they're hurting a lot, especially unfortunately COVID happened, and then people are still reeling from that and trying to find their balance. And for a lot of and people that had kids or possibly may have had that situation during that time period, I say this because my sister had her child during COVID, and then granted it was live. Like my nephew exists, okay, my nephew is live, but I think what I'm saying is that she had her own issues with just being lonely, because of the fact that her husband at that time, not at the time, her husband, her current husband, which is a father, wasn't able to go to hospital. Like, stuff that she would have experienced if. So when you mentioned that, your podcast is live and a lot of people come and have that conversation about what they've gone through and stuff like that, it made me smile, because I think people need that space and the no judgment part. So I commend you what you're doing. I'd be scared to do live. I'd be scared, but a lot of people are hurting like in their own ways. So yeah,
Yeah, it's just the rawness of
yeah,
life, right? And I feel like, especially, like, I had my miscarriage, then COVID happened, and I remember feeling just the same way. It's isolating. And
yeah.
as a woman, when you give birth, you're not just, even if, like, let's say it's not a miscarriage and you have this beautiful, beautiful baby, okay? You're still a woman who is looking in a mirror, and their entire body has changed. And one of the things that I grieved after giving birth to my 3 healthy children that I'm very blessed to have is I still grieved myself, because I realized when I gave birth to my first son, I would never wake up for myself again.
Yes, you're
So there was
different.
never going to be a point where I was going to wake up and be like, what does Kaye want to do today? Like, that doesn't exist anymore. And that will never exist again. And so not only did my body change, I didn't recognize who I was. My identity became all about children, and it became a mother, and it became about keeping these beautiful things alive and having them succeed. And then you kind of are like, well, what about my dreams? What about my goals? And then, so that's also the stigma as well, is even as a mother, even if you didn't go through a miscarriage, you're still grieving, even if you had a baby. And that's also okay. And I think the more people are less judgmental, and for women, if we could just be a collective of feminine energy who all love and support each other, instead of trying to one up each other, and just be real and honest and be like, hey, I'm not doing okay. I'm tired of this mask. I'm tired of distracting myself. I'm tired of posting my highlight reel on social media so everybody thinks my life is perfect. Because I'm telling anybody who's watching this, if you come on my channels, it's raw and it's real. I make fun a lot about my trauma. I use humor, but also I don't hide anything. And that's because I'm really trying to showcase that there are days, even still now, where I get livid. There's still days where I cry in a bathtub. There's still days where I'm happy as can be. And that's all part of this beautiful journey, is that it's not a linear, like, it's not a linear thing where, oh, I lost a baby, or oh, I'm depressed because I had a baby. And then all of a sudden it's life is perfect. You're going to have these ebbs and flows. And the more people and women, especially, just like we create a sisterhood, then I truly believe we're going to have a lot less stigma.
I appreciate you saying that because it's true. And again, anybody's interested, follow the dear girl. Okay. Like a lot of us are stigma. A lot of us are suffering out here. I know, like when you say like a lot of us wear masks, and especially Instagram, like people listen, Instagram is fake. Okay. It's most like half the time I'm just like, I don't have energy for this. I don't, but like, cause you're dealing with your own stuff. I'm going to stop talking, Kate. Okay. With that said, I want to say thank you very much for being part of this platform. Like I'm honored to even have you wanting to be on the platform because I really want to have this conversation. I think a lot of people need to have this conversation regardless. I think it's just educating yourself so you can support other people, or if you're going through, how to learn to support yourself.
Exactly. Thank you so much for having me. It was such an honor. Thank you so much.
I had a great time. This was good. We're glad to have you join us. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, share with anyone that needs to be empowered and inspired, and don't forget to join us next week for the next episode of Health Your Way Podcast. Have a good day, you guys.